Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Overview Committee on what is a beautiful spring morning once again. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, you're very welcome. We'll start by taking the record of attendance, please. Elaine, are you doing that?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Just bear with me. Just for the purpose of the recording, I'll just call members' names out, please, if you could just confirm that you're in attendance. Right, Councillor Trevor Burnham.
Present.
Councillor Sarah Devereux.
Present.
Councillor Dick Edgington.
Present.
Councillor Alex Hall.
Present.
Councillor Sandra Harrison.
Present.
Councillor Makinson Sanders.
Yes, dear.
Councillor Fiona Martin.
Present.
Councillor Helen Matthews.
Present.
Councillor Edward Mossop.
Present.
Councillor Claire Newman.
Present.
And Councillor Sarah Parkin is an apology. And that concludes the call for the record of attendance. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Item 2 is disclosure of interests, if any. If anybody has any interest they need to declare, please do so now. If not, if anything becomes apparent during the course of the meeting, please declare it then. Councillor Makinson Saunders.
Item 4, my son James does grants.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else have anything they need to declare? If not, we'll go to the minutes. Item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, the 9th of March. Can I sign these as a true record, please?
Yeah.
That's proposed and seconded. All those in favour? Anybody against? No. We'll go then to actions on page 19, item 4. And as usual, we'll take these a page at a time. And on the first page, the first one I'd got was number 73, which was the Horncastle Hub report that went to the executive board. Do we know, Anne, if there is any update on the response yet from that?
If I could come in, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Elaine.
Thank you. Yeah, I did speak to Rebecca James Scrutiny Officer, and she's advised that it will go into the portfolio holders meeting in May.
Right, so we should have an
for the
update
next meeting, yes.
for the next meeting. Okay, thank you very much. And right at the bottom there, you've got an update from John Medler on page 25 of this agenda. Anybody else got anything they wish? Councillor Matthews.
Just item 77. Are we there? Have we gone through to that one yet?
No, that's over the page. I think we're still on page 19.
Okay.
Can I do 75, please, Fiona?
Yes.
The indicated you can't plant trees in the summer, basically. You can only plant trees in what we would call the back end, really. So I think that indicator does need to be looked at, and I don't because Alison's not here, she can't tell us. So.
No, well, we did highlight that one when we did the pre-meeting, and Alison was going to look into it, but as she's not with us this morning, I skipped over that one.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you.
But we'll leave it there for next time, and when hopefully Alison's better. Anything else on page 19? If not, turning over to page 20, Councillor Matthews, you wanted number 77.
Just that I've read it, and I've read Tom's response, and although I think it's very well meaning, I just think, you know, there is things in place where these issues should be driven from the community up. And it just looks like we're just doing it from the council down, just, you know, just to note that.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll make a note of that. And again, you had the responses on 77A and B on page 26 of this agenda. Anybody else got anything on page 20?
Yeah, Fiona, we're on E at the top of the page. It says on the needs and aspirations of the residents on page 60 of the agenda. Well, I didn't have a page 60 of the agenda.
I think it was the agenda for that meeting that was taken up, not this meeting.
Right,
It
got
was,
you. So I spent a long time looking for that.
No, this agenda didn't go that far. It didn't go as far as page 60.
No, I didn't think it did. And 76C, I think if we have a champion for conservation, it would be useful if he could report back, because I know some of us put our names forward for that and we were really interested in it. It'd be interesting to have some feedback, exactly, because there's some items a bit further up that I was going to question as well.
Yeah, now I have had some communication with him and he's aware of that, and has talked to Emily Wales about how that will happen. And I mean, there's a couple of suggestions been put forward, really. One is via members for the weekly members bulletin, and the other is via overview. So he is aware of that, and we have spoken about how that will happen.
Okay, well, I'll bring it up further along because it's on your track, on the tracker further along as well.
Yeah, Councillor Matthews. No, that's a legacy hand, I think is the term, isn't it? That's being used. Anybody else on page 20? No, 21 then. And there's a series of things there, Councillor Harrison. Have you got any updates on any of those at the top under 59?
At 59, Chairman, I got no result initially from the leader from the LRF. Elaine was going to take it up with Michelle, I believe, to see if we could get any information from that direction. I'm not at all sure that we're going to be honest.
Michelle?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to follow this up after this meeting to see if we can get anything further. I think now that things are starting to settle in terms of the LRF and moving into recovery, now feels like a better time to have a conversation, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mickelson-Saunders.
Well, it is absolutely vital that we know what's going on. I've got people that live in my ward that were taken to Grimsby Hospital and have died as a result of contracting COVID in Grimsby Hospital. And it's not just one person, it's more than one person. It's vital if you know, we don't draw these lines on the map, greater brains than us to draw these lines. If they draw them, they must be responsible to the people. It is vital we know what's going on in other places. Absolutely vital. You know, not that many people from around here go to Boston or Lincoln. The traffic is all to Grimsby, and if you have a stroke, it's to Scunthorpe. So that's yet another trust. Oh no, it isn't. It's Scunthorpe and Gould Trust. Whatever. So it is vital that we get a handle on this.
Well, we're trying.
Can I raise something on that, Fiona? I was just looking at, because in the minutes we were asking whether North Lincolnshire Council or North East Links had a health scrutiny committee. They do have one, a health and certainly in North East Links, they have the Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Panel, which at the last meeting of that, which was in March, they had 4 members of the Northern Links and Gould NHS present, talking about the A&E and stuff like that. And there is a Councillor Hudson, who's chairing that. It didn't go on for very long, but it was an hour and a half meeting. So there is a mechanism there that maybe we ought to be writing to seeing whether we can observe or attend.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, councillor Mussett. That's helpful. Michelle, can we leave you to talk to councillor Harrison outside the meeting to see how that might be facilitated?
Yeah, happy to do that and then feedback.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on page 21?
Can I just ask about the Gypsy and Traveller site? Why isn't
Yeah.
that? It says a planning policy service manager, blah blah. I was going to update. Why? So why isn't that under Mike Gildersleeves if it's part of the district plan? Why is it under Andy Fisher? I don't understand how some of these jobs have been apportioned since we've become an alliance. That's all.
I can't answer that, but I think Mr. Gildersleeves maybe can.
Thank you. Through yourself, Madam Chairman. In response to that particular point, I deal with the planning policy side, which is about, making sure we have sufficient sites to meet our required needs and ensure that we have a sound plan. In terms of the delivery of those particular sites, where those sites are within council interest to deliver, that is a function of assets. It is something that both myself and Andy are working closely on. And in fact, we've actually got a meeting later today to discuss how we take those forward and ensure that they are delivered. Because from my perspective and from Simon's perspective, in terms of the local plan review, one of the things that we will get examined on is around whether we have sufficient sites to meet our current and future need for Gypsy and Travellers. So we need to make sure that those allocations are coming forward, or if we then need to look through the local plan to look at making further allocations or different allocations. So hopefully that answers the question.
Well, I am concerned about the site in Louth, and perhaps I can have a conversation with you about it. It would be better than this venue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mrs. Harrison.
Chairman, number 59B, I think I was a bit optimistic when I said I would do this, because I really am finding it's far, far more complicated than I initially thought, because I'd only picked up from health scrutiny the organisations that were reporting. But what I am discovering is it's so difficult to find what the CCG now is actually in charge of. And I was going to make a suggestion later in the paper when we speak about something else, because really, I don't think we've any idea who does what now. And I think it's going to affect some of the services that we might want to perhaps inquire about or chase up. And at the moment, we don't know which service actually provides them.
Yeah, you're quite right. Absolutely.
No.
Or commissions them, shall we say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle, is that something you could maybe assist Councillor Mrs. Harrison with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think now's quite a key time with the transition to integrated care systems as well, just to understand how all of that's going to play out. So if it's okay, I'll speak to colleagues within that team. And would you be happy for them to maybe come and present to a future overview committee?
I think that would be very helpful, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that would be very helpful. It would aid our understanding, I think. Okay, anything else on page 21 then? Page 22? No, and page 23 then? If nobody's got anything else on the actions, then we'll go on to item 5, which is update on the review of the local plan. So, Simon, I think that's over to you.
It is. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for inviting me along today as well. I have produced just a very quick presentation, which I think will help. If I may just load that up.
Yeah.
And I hope it will let me share my screen.
Just made you a co-host, Simon.
Thanks, Chair. Right, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent, thanks. It's hidden in my notes, so I'll just go through it and ad lib as I go through, but that should be fine. So I thought it'd be useful just to briefly go through what planning policy is and how it's created, just for those that aren't, excuse me, familiar with it. It'll only be a very quick run through on that. Talk about the evidence that we actually have to produce, how it works in relation to local and national decision making, and then look at policy committee and where we're at and where we're going with the local plan review. So just as a brief introduction, planning policy is supposed to be a decision-making framework. It manages different uses and spaces, and it does it by setting out a long-term vision. So the NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework, says a local plan should run for a minimum of 15 years. Our current local plan that's adopted runs through till 2031, and the reviewed local plan, we're looking to extend that to 2040. One of the key things is that it provides legitimacy through effective consultation and the testing of evidence. So we don't just make up policy as we go along. The policy is based on evidence that we gather, and it's based on consultation with the public and stakeholders as well. Community engagement is key. Talking to the local communities. Initially, we produced a vision statement looking at our objectives for the local plan. We carry out stages of consultation throughout the original local plan process and the review process as well. And that helps to get buy-in from the community, to help them be involved with the plan, because ultimately the local plan is going to shape development that happens all around them across the district. So the planning policies, if you've actually read the local plan, it's not that tedious a read. There's some interesting stuff in there. But you'll see that the policies generally are actually positively worded. We will support development in these circumstances. Again, mentioning there, it's based on evidence, and we have the presumption in favour of sustainable development. That's something that, again, runs through national policy. And the idea is that where you've got a proposal in front of you that's sustainable, it should be supported and approved. We do have to look at other material considerations along the way, but the local plan is the starting point for making decisions. So that's by delegated decision or by planning committee. And we should see there, it should be written in plain English. Obviously, it should be able to be read by anyone out there, not just planning agents, a member of the public, councillors. Anyone should be able to pick that document up and read it and understand how it's going to affect them. I'm whizzing through these slides quickly because there's a bit more detail later on, and I want to sort of open it up for questions as well. That just briefly shows how we got to our current local plan. Started in May 2009, so a long process to get it adopted in 2018. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes, and the problem you have when you're taking that amount of time, you have lots of changes along the way. National changes, governments change as well. Internal corporate priorities change along the way. New legislations introduced for looking at and policies introduced for looking at how you look at housing targets and growth. So there's lots of different things that can change along the way. Policy committees, it says there's 11 members. They meet roughly every 5 or 6 weeks. We have about 8 meetings a year. And the idea of policy committee is that it monitors the review of the local plan. They've been involved with creation of the recent issues and options consultation, which we've literally just finished a week ago. So that was a big public consultation on the housing strategy primarily for the district. So the issues and options, I'll talk about a little bit later on and explain what that is. But other work they're involved with, how we score the settlements. They look at all the briefs for work that we need doing and approve those and make any amendments that need to be in there. They'll be involved with how our housing strategy is actually shaped based on the issues and options work. So the local plan is a living document. The National Planning Policy Framework says we should review it a minimum of every 5 years. Now, we've actually said that we will actually review it by April 2022. So it was adopted in July 2018. So that's just under 4 years. The inspector wanted us to look at a few things. One of the key things was the housing strategy, and in particular, how that relates to the coast and how we deliver housing on the coast. At the moment, we're updating the evidence. So we've got various bits of work going on, producing a new housing market assessment, which is looking at the housing need across the district, an economic viability assessment, which is looking at affordable housing and where it's viable to provide affordable housing on new developments. We have work going on looking at the economy, so an economic baseline study, which produces a baseline of the state of the economy across the district. Retail studies as well, which are looking at the health of the town centres, whether there's any need for additional comparison and convenience goods stores and floor space within the main towns as well. So lots of evidence refreshes going up at the moment. Excuse me. One of the key things that's also come in recently is the need potentially for biodiversity net gain on development. So we have to start building in potentially that as well. Carbon reduction as well. We need to potentially build in up to 31% carbon reduction across all new developments. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment in the background, getting all the evidence up to date. As I mentioned earlier, evidence is really important. It's what we base our decisions on, and policy committee base their decisions on when we decide what we're going to review and how we're going to review the policies. So the future. We've just completed our issues and options consultation. So as I mentioned, that's a big document setting out different potential options for resolving or changing the housing strategy across the district. So do we keep a hierarchy of settlements, towns, large villages, main villages? Do we split the coast and the inland areas like we do at the moment? So this document asked those questions and gave different options to the public. So it's the public, stakeholders, anyone and everyone can reply to that. So we've had parish councils replying. We've had bodies like like Natural England, like Environment Agency, they put in their comments on it as well, and the general public, housing developers. It's a big consultation exercise. We've had quite a lot of responses which need processing at the moment, but that gives us an idea of how everyone else out there feels about our housing strategy and how we should move forwards with it in the future. We have to keep a duty to cooperate. So that's a record of who we've talked to along the way. So again, that's people like the Environment Agency, like County Council, the Highways Authority. How have we worked with them to get their views about our policies and our proposed policies going forwards, looking at the potential impacts of them and making sure we're working with these people. We don't always agree. We don't have to agree necessarily, but we have to keep a record of those discussions to submit to the inspector. The big task after that will be actually writing the new policies. We've got 29 policies, I think it is, in the current local plan. That's the actual set of policies in the policy document. We also have a separate document which sets out settlement proposals maps. And that document has a map for all of the main settlements, and that sets out where all the different land uses are. So that helps developers visualize where the policies apply within a particular settlement. Eventually, we'll get what we consider to be a final draft. Policy committee will go through that and agree that, and that will then, I suspect, be agreed by full council as well, to then go out to a formal consultation on that. So again, it's asking the public, the stakeholders, what their views are on our reviewed local plan. We'll make any modifications that we need to make based on the feedback that we get through that consultation. And then we have to submit our final plan and all the supporting evidence that we have as well to the Planning Inspectorate. As I mentioned earlier, April 2022 is the submission date that our local plan sets out for that. That goes to the Planning Inspectorate. They will then allocate an inspector to deal with it. Usually you would have an examination in public. You certainly do for the main local plan, and if it's a fairly heavily reviewed local plan, then there will likely be another examination in public. So that could take 2 or 3 weeks. And that's, if anyone's ever seen a public inquiry, been to a planning public inquiry, it's a little bit like that. It's a slightly more informal court case where the inspectors will sit there and they will ask questions about how we've come to the decisions we have in terms of the local plan and the strategy and direction we want to take with it. Members of the public, the stakeholders can come in and they will sit there and they will give their views as well. So that's all done in public. The inspectors will then go away and they will read through all the local plan and they will make recommendations, what they feel needs changing, if anything, to make sure that the plan is found sound. We don't want to be adopting a local plan that isn't sound, because we will get challenged as a council when we make planning decisions using that local plan. So following the examination in public, following the inspector's report, we will make the modifications that we feel are needed to make sure that the plan will be found sound, and then ultimately the local plan will be adopted. Just quickly, some of the things that we need to take into account, may or may not have heard of them or seen them or even read them, but the planning white paper, a huge document written by government looking at quite sweeping changes across the planning system. I've talked about evidence all the way through, but one of the things they're suggesting is that they want to reduce the burden of evidence gathering when it comes to local plans. Quite how that will happen, I don't know, because we obviously need evidence to know what's going on and what needs changing. They're suggesting things like planning zones for different types of development as well, national design guides, national Section 106 contribution regimes. Section 106 contributions are basically contributions the developer pays to offset the impacts of development. So a housing development will have an impact on schools, it will have an impact on the health service. So the developer pays a contribution to offset that impact, which goes to the health service or the schools. A new standard methodology for calculating housing need. I mentioned earlier all the changes in legislation and things that happen along the way. The government have now decided they want to centralise how we calculate housing need. As I said, the local plan review is the key thing that we're moving forwards with, but also one of the functions we also deal with is neighbourhood planning, which is basically local communities can actually make their own mini local plan. And it goes through very similar stages to the ones I've described for a local plan in terms of consultation, public engagement, drafting, and then ultimately an examination in public. It's often, it can be a less formal examination in public. And then ultimately to be adopted as well. And a neighbourhood plan will sit alongside a local plan and has to be used in decision making. It forms part of the development plan and will carry the same weight as a local plan as well. We actually have a few of those. We have two adopted. Horncastle and Alford have an adopted neighbourhood plan, which the planning officers and planning committee take into account when they're making decisions. And we have another one that's due for referendum to be adopted. It's actually the phrase they use is it will be made by the council, but it's effectively the same as adoption. That referendum's coming up with the next elections, and we have 3 more in the pipeline as well. So communities are quite keen to get these neighbourhood plans in place as well. So that's all I've got from the presentation. Thank you for letting me present that to you, Chairman, and I'll stop sharing now. There we go.
Thank you.
Yep.
I've got Councillor Makinson Saunders wants to speak first.
I think she's on mute.
Yeah, you're quite right. Well spotted. I talk to myself most of the time, so what's the difference? Yeah, I did the last town plan. That was before neighbourhood plans came in, and I didn't have the energy to do a neighbourhood plan after that because it is so time consuming and such hard work. But that wasn't what I was going to say. We've ticked most of the boxes of that. And I felt really annoyed. We got a grant from Community Council to do it. We're the first town in Lincolnshire to do it. And we've never had anybody give us any praise for that. And it was jolly hard work, and it encompassed all services, which I think is better than just neighbourhood planning, because we need to look at a town as a whole, don't we? I don't think we do enough of that. This is all picking bits here and picking bits there. Each town in the olden days, I've got, in the olden days, that sounds awful, doesn't it? But I've got things that the council produced from years ago where they took each town and looked at each town and what its functions were, how it worked and all the rest of it. I'm staggered we don't do that because we don't understand how our communities work. And I think that's really important. District plans are, well, I expect Mr. Jenrick waves his magic wand and that's it. I was horrified going out, taking my leaflets out to go down the far end of Louth to a development off Eastfield Road where they're very nice houses, but they're continually flooded and they're absolutely brassed off. The houses have been up for 2 years, and some of the houses have been sold 3 times in 2 years. It's outrageous. And those swales and the water system just do not work. They've been dug up, they've had to be redone. They're going to develop in the field above, so more water is going to come down. We're developing in places, thanks to things like district plans and government policy worse, more aptly, I suppose. And I felt really sorry for those residents, because we haven't done a good job for the residents. We're building in places where, quite frankly, it's absolutely daft. And the housing need is something that I was going to question. People say to me, oh, I'd like a bungalow, but there aren't any bungalows. We are building, especially in the ward I represent on the district, so many thumping great 5-bedroom monster houses with garages, which would probably take a family of 6. I mean, quite frankly, I know the builders are selling them. They're huge amounts of money, but they're mostly people that are moving into the area. I just find the housing need is a tenuous thing. And I know I've rabbited on, but I feel really passionately about it. I don't think we're doing the right thing all the time for our residents, for our existing residents. And I know Mike and Simon will tell me I'm wrong and this is government policy and we have to go by it. But I just wonder who plans are made for at the end of the day. Sorry, I'll stop rabbiting now. Sorry.
Simon, I think you're still screen sharing.
Oh.
At the minute. I don't seem to be able to go back to gallery view. I don't know if anybody else can't either.
No, we're all right.
It's working. I don't think I'm sharing.
I'm on gallery view.
We're all
on gallery. You're on gallery. Oh no, you've gone now. There you are. You're on gallery.
Got it. Sorry, I've got it now. Right, thank you. Simon, do you want me to take each question at a time, or shall I take 1 or 2 more speakers and come back to you?
It's probably easier if I feed back, because it might answer some sort of future questions as well.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of the local communities, I think that's why the Localism Act introduced neighbourhood planning. The idea was to try and give that power back to the local communities to produce their own neighbourhood plan, which would be sort of centred on their own community and look at the issues there. It still has to be in line with the local plan, still conform with national policy as well, but it gives them the ability to add a local flavour for their own particular area to the local plan. And what it also introduced was devolution of powers as well. Horncastle actually, the town council actually make decisions on certain types of planning applications. So it's to give that sort of ability back to communities to have more of a say on what happens in their local area. In terms of housing, it's a tricky one. I mean, at the end of the day, a developer will build what the developer wants to build and can get the most money for and can make profit for. We have to try and make sure we write policies that provide or give the ability to provide housing for certain groups. So special housing for older people is one of the things we have to look at. We have to make sure that there's land, as Mike mentioned before, allocated for gypsies and travellers as well. So we do have to look at the needs of different communities, but we can't make developers build. It's hard for us to make developers to build certain things that we want them to build. The market will usually dictate, unfortunately.
Can I just say that Horncastle haven't been making decisions during COVID, and because of the system, and I think inevitably there's always some frustration with local planning committees from town councils that they feel that what they say, or whether they've got a local plan or not, neighbourhood plan or not, it doesn't always seem to be taken into account by the planning officers at Manby. And that's a frustration, I think, that even with the neighbourhood plan still happens. Mike, did you want to come in on that? Or I've got Councillor Mrs. Harrison afterwards.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to kind of pick up one of the key themes, really, because what we're talking about in planning is about balance and about weighing up often competing objectives and competing aspirations and those sorts of things. And what we have to do is trying to balance those up, both in decision making, but also in plan making. and there are often trade-offs. The local plan isn't supposed to be a book of rules. It's not supposed to be a tick box exercise that you must tick everything and then you pass go. There are proposals that have to try and fit and weave their way through a number of different, often competing policy objectives. For example, let's talk about affordable housing. We have a high demand for affordable housing. Well, the only way you really get that delivered is either through government grant and through the RPs delivering it as exceptions, or that you have to look at a quantum of development to pay for the affordable housing as a form of mitigation. So again, it's a balancing act there in terms of actually when you look at a site, sometimes do you go, actually we need 15 units can fit on there just about. The benefit is we get the affordable housing. Or do we say, well, actually, no, we push the developer to 10 units, which is better in terms of overall place, quality, et cetera, but then you don't get the affordable housing. So it is about recognising those trade-offs. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Harrison. You're muted, Sandra.
I'm tending to agree with Jill, what she's saying about the lack of bungalows. And I know the well-used arguments against it because of developers' choice. But the fact remains that we have many people living in large houses still who would willingly move to a bungalow, reduce that larger house for families, but just can't find them. We were fortunate, we waited a long time, we found one in the end, but that is a housing problem that could be partially addressed by the situation we have at the moment if bungalows were included. And Simon mentioned about having to pay account to different groups, including housing for older people. But there is a group of people before you get to being called older people.
Yeah.
Actually, would very much appreciate an increase in the bungalows that are available within our district. I think we're missing the fact that that group of people exist and there are a lot of them in the district. I mean, we're paying so much attention to housing for older people, you know, with all the new organisations that have started up and are addressing older people, but they are addressing the group who perhaps need more assistance than the ones I'm speaking of. And I just feel they're totally missed out of the equation when we're discussing future planning. That's my bit. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I've got nobody else indicating they want to speak or ask a question. If not, Simon or Mike, do you want to just sort of sum up at all, or?
If I can just come in front of you, Simon, what I would say, and not wishing to use Councillor Ashton's analogy about battleships and the right time to engage, but it is incredibly important that obviously we've had the issues and options. At some point there will be a draft plan coming round. It's incredibly important that members and communities get involved in that process, because however small or important any particular point may be, they will all get taken into consideration, and this plan is going to set the direction for the next 15 years until, well, obviously with a review in there as well. So it is really, really important that people are actively encouraged to engage in that process.
Thank you. Yeah. I've got Councillor Makinson Saunders and Councillor Harrison both waving at me. So Councillor Makinson Saunders.
But can we have something in this new plan about infrastructure? Because that is what the killer is. And infrastructure is vital if you want to develop. We don't have our infrastructure here in Louth is Victorian. There's no way it's going to be, we can't dig every blasted street up in Louth and put new stuff in. When we did it, it's been a disaster down where I live for the last 2.5 years, and they still haven't finished it correctly. We don't have the infrastructure to get what you're piling into our market, the market town in which I live, and changing the character. And it is just so frustrating. And I know planners see it differently from us on the other side, but we passionately care about our towns. absolutely passionately, and we cannot, you know, we have roads in the centre of town where they're closed for days on end because of broken pipes. We can't take all of this extra development you're piling on us, and I know we're going to get more. And I could cry for the future of my town. It's awful.
And I think that also applies to other towns. It applies to my town.
Absolutely.
Here as
Absolutely.
well. Infrastructure and Victorian sewers, etc., are big issues, and Victorian roads are big issues wherever you go in our market towns, I think, and also some of our villages. Mike, do you want to respond to that one before I go to Councillor Mrs. Harrison?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's a very emotive subject. I completely get it. And all I can say to you is that the infrastructure is considered as part of this process. We engage with the infrastructure providers. We ask for their thoughts at all stages on the plan and take into account any comments. And obviously, if we need to look at particular improvements in certain areas, those will come out through the plan process or indeed subsequent application process. So it is something that is considered. But I come back to Simon's point that he said at the start, that we are developing policies that are based upon evidence, and those evidence that's technical studies. It's the involvement of the statutory bodies that are involved rather than just assertion. So there is a balance there that I have to make you aware of, but I can fully assure you that infrastructure is something that we will be considering.
Thank you. I think sometimes the issue is that those authorities, and not always statutory authorities, but authorities consulted, are loath to admit that there is a problem with infrastructure because it means that they need to make an investment if they admit there's a problem.
I'm glad you said that.
I was trying to be diplomatic in what I said. Probably not succeeding, but there you go. Councillor Mrs. Harrison.
Thanks, Chairman. Mine's just a quickie. When all the compiling of the results from the surveys from communities, will you be able to give us the figures? Because I'd be really interested to know what response we get, because many of the consultations we run, very few responses from our residents. If you could provide those in the end, I think it'd be very interesting to know how much influence they've had on the final results. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Simon, are you going to respond to that one?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Harrison. It's very difficult. I mean, you can lead a horse to water. We do our best in terms of advertising and as many different media streams as we can to get it out there. But you can't make people fill these in and send them back, unfortunately. Response rates traditionally have been relatively low on this kind of public consultation. And I think we've probably had, off the top of my head, I will get you exact figures when we've processed them. But I think we've had around 50 responses to it, which is relatively low, and that does include stakeholders as well. That's not just members of the public and developers. The document itself, it's been online. I mean, it's written in a plain English format. It's relatively easy to understand, but it is issues that people don't realise and are important to them until the local plan's adopted and until they get a development next door to them and they want to do something about it. Unfortunately, the stage to get involved and shape that local plan is now, not in 3 years' time when Joe Bloggs next door wants to build a house and they want to object to it. So that's the tricky thing. You know, I will feedback. There'll be a report going to policy committee, but I can quite happily feedback the actual figures and responses that we've had as well.
Thank you. I was afraid of that. That would be
okay. Thank you very much. I've got nobody else indicating they wish to speak. So thank you, Simon and Mike. That's been extremely interesting and helpful, I think, and no doubt we'll keep an eye on the process as it develops. But you're very welcome to stay with us, but we appreciate that you will have other things calling on your time. So thank you very much for your attendance this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
We'll go on to item 6 then. And good morning, Martin. It's very good of you to join us this morning as well. Elaine did very helpfully send back out, in case we'd lost it, the report, the that Martin produced for the last overview meeting back in March, but I think people felt that they'd like to meet you in person and hear what you got to say, Martin, if that was okay. Did you want to say anything now?
I suppose it depends what you want to hear, Chair. Said it the nicest way.
Shall I just open it for questions? And
yes, certainly. I wasn't sure what you were requesting this morning, whether you wanted a formal presentation of anything. I'm quite happy to come back and do that at any stage. But I was just asked to put a snapshot together of a bit of my working life, really, which I did for the last meeting. And I'm quite happy to take questions on any of it or anything wider, should anybody wish.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's very comprehensive and it was very interesting what you have been doing, really. I mean, quite a lot of it seemed to be out on the coast.
Yeah, as usual.
Is that a fair comment, or have you been involved in market towns as well?
No, I've been involved with the market towns, the vital and viable stuff, and I have been out to speak at market towns. So I've linked into that. They haven't come back quite as quickly as, of course, people do. So my energies are sort of spread where I get the requests, really.
And how are those requests referred, Martin?
Most of them directly. Most of them coming directly to me from where I've spoken at. Some of the local groups that I've spoken with, the Life Museum, for example, is one where we've been out to speak with them, and they've come in on the back of that with some of the digital stuff that they wanted some help with. I'm not an expert in all the fields, but I can certainly help shape up the any grant applications that need to be helped. And I've been trying to do that as I've gone along as well.
I just wondered, reading your report and just following on from the comments we've just made, whether all councillors are aware of you being there and the service that you can help and provide with. And I didn't know if it would be a good idea to just do a very brief paragraph explaining who you are and how people get in touch with you and what your role is for the weekly members bulletin, so that everybody's aware that you're there. I mean, your report is that you've given us is very good. So maybe we could send that out to everybody just to explain. But I just wondered how many people are aware of your of what you do and what you can offer to communities, really.
Yes, that's a fair comment, Chair. I know that when we get busy with the cold face, we're not as well recognised outside of the probably outside of Tedder Hall than I am within Tedder Hall, and I do accept that. But I'll do anything that's needed to be done to widen the scope of people realising who I am and what I do. I'm quite happy to do that.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Meckinson-Saunders, you were first.
Well, yet again, it's all about something that this council fails every time on, and that's communications. Most people don't know what's going on, and all we see is some bizarre grant application for a railway, which, I mean, for goodness sake, we couldn't stop laughing when we read that. And the time is spent on things like that. And we have loads of people who don't know what's going on at the council. They don't know how to apply for it. We don't know how to send people in that direction. It's all about communication. And we really, really need to get a grip of this. You know, the gentleman said about the museum. Ward members have been informed about that. So why not? You know, people don't know what the Constitution says and what they're meant to do. And it really is frustrating.
Okay, thank you. Well, I've got now a list of people. I've got Councillor Mossop, then Councillor Harrison, and then Councillor Matthews. So if I take those people and then I'll come back to you, Martin, if that's
certainly.
okay.
Certainly, Chair.
Councillor Mossop was first.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Martin. Yeah, I wondered whether it was an appropriate use of your time to be able to provide a kind of list of funding options for groups, or whether that's something actually you already do. So if somebody from a small local group rang you up and said, I need £20,000 for rewiring a Methodist community centre or whatever. What options are available out there? I know that there's the Coastal Communities Fund or the Dong Energy, there's the lottery, there's various other things, but there are also some restrictions on the kind of options there are for certain groups. Certainly out in the rural communities, the churches are often the sort of backbone of the villages, and they actually do a huge amount of outreach. But in fact, they struggle sometimes to get the funding, and particularly because they haven't been a village hall or a so they've missed out on these very large grants that have come from the Treasury during the COVID lockdown. So whilst a lot of their work has been stalled for at least a year, I think there's a backlog of groups that will be wanting to revitalise and regenerate and probably change their way of working. But actually sometimes they're very, very constricted by the fact that they are linked to a church group. So two questions there really. Have you got a list you could present to me saying, ... here are all the funding options for your little project in Fulstow or wherever I represent, and B, what's the view really from the local council about funding in religious organisations? Thank you.
Two questions. Thanks for the questions, Councillor Mossop. The first question is, there is a list that's published every Friday afternoon that I get from Central Lincolnshire, which incorporates East Lindsey itself with the shifting patterns of funding and where things are coming from. We can share that out. We can give that newsletter to whoever requires that. So that's
everybody.
That's the most up-to-date list that I get. Secondly,
where does that come from, Martin? You say Central Lincolnshire. What do you mean?
It comes from the. Forgive me. The lady's just moved. The lady's just moved on now. I can't remember her name. I'll have to come back with.
Do you mean Samantha Smith from?
No. Wendy Hall.
Oh, okay. See, that's a new name to me.
Yeah.
There's lots of people giving the advice out. Community Council of Lincolnshire, which is now part of the YMCA, produce information. I wish we'd all get together and produce one list. It would be a lot easier. Sorry.
Yeah. Maybe there's an option of doing a couple of workshops here. Before COVID broke out, we started to do the vital and viable and getting around the market towns, and then COVID hit and all the face-to-face contacts been ceased. But maybe there's an option of picking those workshops up again when people get released a little bit from the difficulties we're having at the moment.
Yeah, that'd be really useful, I think.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. I've done them for the CABs over the past 12 months. I've done a couple there for them. So we're happy to do that in any guise that takes. And this
it'd be nice if something happened for vital and viable.
I think there's a message and a theme coming out of this, which is around communication and people being aware of what is available. I've got Councillor Harrison and then Councillor Matthews.
Just got a second question about the church groups.
Yes.
That backbone of the community struggle to get funds because there's been problems in terms of their fundraising over the last year. Is it as easy to get them the funding?
It's not as easy, but I can look. It's not as easy, sir, but I can look into that and I can do some details on that, some detailed work for you.
Thank you.
That would be helpful, I think. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chairman. Very interesting report. Really good to have such a good detailed update. I'm particularly interested in having any more information that's available now or in the future about the Campus for Future Living in Mablethorpe, please. I assume it's in early development, but yeah, I would like to know more about that.
I'm happy to come back and present on that. That's a very large subject. I'm happy to bring some detail back and present on that as an individual topic if you wish.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean that I'm sure Councillor Matthews is going to tell us about that in a minute. But I mean, is that something that a session at a reserved members' day might be a good session to do? Because I think the whole of the council would probably be interested, rather than just overview committee, really. But Councillor Matthews, you're next.
Just to say to Sandra, happy at any time to talk about the Centre for Future Living, and it's quite fluid at the moment. There's lots of things happening and all very exciting, many things around training our own workforce, and just something that links up other organisations around health and wellbeing on the coast, which is really good. I just want to say thank you to Martin. As soon as we found out there was a funding manager on the coast, we were on to you straight away. We're very proactive. We're looking all the time for money and for grants. We've linked very closely with our county councillor, who every month circulates, and you might want to hear this, Edward, a rural networks grant.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you've heard of that. No, very, very good. And it covers a multitude of granting opportunities. And we have tapped into quite a few of those as well. And every time we want some help, we do go to Martin. He's got the expertise, can point us in the right direction. And I have to say, we are very much in support of the railway project. It's a real opportunity to open unused railway tracks. And, you know, it may seem a bit far-fetched, but there is potential there. And, you know, we're ambitious on the coast. We're willing to sort of follow that as well. So I'd just like to say thank you to Martin.
I thought it was all farmland.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think, as I just said, the main message is from this morning is about information and giving people the information so that they know what is available, and the weekly list of what's available, that would actually be quite good to include in members' point brief as well. So can we leave that with you, Martin, to look at sort of doing a piece for the members' point brief to say who you are, how you're contactable, and what's available to councillors and communities.
Certainly, Chair.
I think that would be extremely useful on a regular basis.
Okay.
Anybody else got any questions or comments? No, if not, thank you very much, Martin. That's been, I think, a really useful discussion this morning, and we look forward to the updates.
Yes, with pleasure, I'll do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair.
You're very welcome to stay, but we appreciate the fact that you'll be busy and have other things to do.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Nice to meet everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Item 7 is Health Scrutiny Committee for Lincolnshire. Councillor Mrs Harrison, as usual, you've given us a very full and comprehensive update from your meeting on the 16th of March. Did you want to add anything to this before I ask people if they want to ask any questions?
Not to this, Chairman, because it was obviously a much shorter meeting than usual. And just to say that the next meeting was cancelled because of further, and of course we haven't got the dates for the future yet until after the county elections.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Makinson Saunders.
Yeah, I did write to Sandra, and so I think I need to bring it up today. There's a huge problem around this area with the breast screening service. I can understand why that might have been removed during COVID for obvious reasons, but women are being required from around here to go. Lincoln is the closest. It's a jolly long way on a bus to get to things. An awful lot of people are not going to, are turning down their appointments now, and we should be looking to see, we should be pushing for it to be reinstated back out to these rural areas as fast as possible. I can't stress that enough. It would be better almost if people from around here went up to Grimsby. At least they could get on the bus and go there. But I think it's a whole day out, and a lot of people are probably disabled or just can't manage it. And so the breast screening service, I think, has got to be a top priority for us getting sorted out again. No, you know, I feel really strongly about that. For a lot of ladies are really upset about the lack of service locally.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Harrison.
Thank you, Chairman. This was really what was mentioned earlier when we spoke about the actions. I do agree. I think we need to have somebody in and come and speak to us and say, you know, what is going to happen about services that are being withdrawn, whether they're going to be reinstated, who's responsible for that anyway, that if necessary we could lobby them. But at the moment, you know, we don't really know what's going on at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this applies to a range of services post-COVID, doesn't it, really? And again, it's tying into what we've talked about previously, and which is what we want to scrutinise as a committee post-COVID. I mean, there's going to be a whole range of health services that it's going to be a really big job to try and pick up and move forward on, because we keep hearing about the waiting lists and the undiagnosed problems. And really, we do, or the health services for Lincolnshire and elsewhere need to have a plan as to how they're going to address those. I don't know, Michelle, do you want to make any comment on that at the minute?
I think this links to that earlier point about trying to understand those roles, responsibilities, and what's happening and changing. While you were on the other item, I have made contact with the Chief Exec of the CCG to ask if he would come to a future meeting of Overview Committee. So it would be really helpful to have some of those questions prepared to be able to give to him to make sure that you get the information you need at that moment, if that helps.
Michelle, could we have something about cancer services in general? Because I think there's a lot of disquiet about cancer services in rural areas, basically.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Harrison. You're muted, Sandra.
The mouse doesn't always work, it runs away with you. Yes, among others, really, is the ULHT, because you'll see in my report, I mentioned that previously, before COVID, there'd been a suggestion that some of the services from cottage hospitals was going to be removed or changed. It was put on hold, as in my report. It's bound to crop up again, and that will have a huge impact. So that's another one that we really will want to know what's happening about, because that's so important, because of, you know, the travel issues, etc.
Yeah.
I think there was an actions, I think, Elaine, somewhere in the actions about inviting members or health members to, not members, but health officers to come and talk at a Reserve Members' Day that I think Anne was looking at organising.
Yeah, I can't quite bring them to mind. I think Anne was liaising with Michelle over it at some point. I know dental services was one of them, and the ambulance service. But obviously they were shelved due to COVID and the pressures on the service. So maybe just have another look at it.
I was just thinking that some of these things, I mean, it will be excellent to get people to come and talk to Overview Committee, but I think a lot of the council will be extremely interested in some of this, and whether we have people to an overview meeting and then invite the rest of the council to come and listen, or whether a reserved members' day initially might be the best forum. But I just think that, you know, we're 11 members from 55, and it is such an important topic that somehow we need to involve or give the opportunity to the rest of the council to listen as well. I've got Councillor Matthews and then Councillor Mossop, and then I'll come back to Michelle.
It was just, again, something for noting. I've had quite a lot of people contact me, non-COVID deaths, where they've literally been abandoned to their own resources, left on their own to cope with somebody who's dying, who can't get the services, couldn't get the help. And I know it's because of the pandemic, but somehow along the, you know, as we move forward, we have to learn from this to make sure it doesn't happen again. So I'm left with, you know, people in the ward who are, you know, grieving, but they're also traumatized by what they've been through without any support. And it, you know, some of the cases have been truly shocking, you know, really, really upsetting. So it's just really to note that, Sandra, because I'm sure there will be more, and it's happened in other areas. And it's just, you know, when we go forward at the appropriate time, that we're learning from this, and that if we come in this situation again, that we're better prepared. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Councillor Mossop.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly agree. I think the Reserve Members' Day is probably a better forum for everybody to get their issues raised with a team of people and speakers from various healthcare providers. I listened to a really sad story on our local Spotted Facebook page for one of the villages about the discharge policy, the assess to discharge, or whatever, a new system of how patients are discharged. And the case was really sad with an elderly lady who had delirium, which had been untreated. Because actually she was dehydrated, and that was one of our local hospitals in Lincolnshire where this had happened, and there'd been continuing attempts to discharge her when really this discharge to assess home first policy introduced by the NHS was not working. It was broken, so the story is there. It's for everyone to see, and I'm not going to go into detail, but I think we've all got these stories locally where we need to hear what the answers are, and if there are any solutions, and also for these people to hear what the views are, because these are the sort of places where the local population put their concerns and worries. So yeah. Members' Day will be really useful, I think.
And as soon as possible, I think, as well. Michelle, did you want to say anything before I go back to Councillor Mrs. Harrison?
Thank you. Yeah, I think there are two really sort of key and distinct things here. One is around, from my perspective as an overview committee, understanding those changes. There have been so many changes, moving to the single CCG, the transition to the ICS, so lots and lots of things happening. And I'm wondering then for the Reserve Members' Day, if it's helpful for either myself or Alison to collate some of those key questions and key examples to sort of almost be able to play them back to colleagues that might come to a Reserve Members' Day and be able to respond to them. I think the difficulty with health is it's so broad, and actually there won't be one single person that can answer all of those questions. So I think any of the prep work that we can do will help our colleagues sort of give us the best feedback and support, and be able to learn from those insights locally as well. So if that's of help to members, then I'm happy to collate those from you.
That would be helpful, I think, and I think to some degree we'll leave it to you in consultation with Alison to sort what you think is the best programme for giving information to members in the best way possible. I've got Councillor Harrison, Councillor Newman, and then Councillor Makinson-Saunders.
Thank you, Chairman. Is it me next?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks. I was only perhaps going to suggest, following what Councillor Mossop said, there is the organisation PALS, connected with hospitals and all the different health organisations that do deal with complaints. Perhaps that could be added to the point brief, so that, you know, if members get inquiries, they can pass it on. They are very, very good, very, very quick in their responses, and do try to sort out problems for patients and their relatives on behalf of patients. So, you know, they're easily accessible once people have the information.
Yeah, I think that certainly in my case they used PALS, Sandra, which was great that they did that. But I think it was just the highlighting of the issue that these things are happening that they
Yeah.
wanted to share with other people.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Newman, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. Just in addition to what people are saying, I just think it might be worth highlighting the issues that we have along the coast. So we've spent a long time in lockdown. We're now encouraging visitors to boost back our economy, but we are struggling immensely as a community, getting in touch with, even seeing a doctor face to face in the local surgery, and that compounded by our numbers triple, times, in the week when people are coming for holidays, means that actually getting access to any kind of health service, from even just a stub toe to something quite serious, is just, I don't think, unless you're in that situation, that people really recognise the magnitude of that service.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been told directly from the surgery in Mablethorpe that they will never go back to face. Never.
No.
Really?
Yeah. And, they're trying to do things like asthma clinics over the phone. And I just think that if we're not at the forefront of trying to, when you've got going from a number of 5,000 residents to 30,000 residents in a week, it's really compounding the services that are available to us, plus the actual getting, go back to the fact that we're in this area where, trying to even get to a hospital from the Mablethorpe area is difficult enough, but not to even get to your own surgery. We don't have a dentist. I think there's a bigger picture that we're not actually hearing about, that we need to be on top of.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thank you. I've got Councillor Meckinson Saunders, then Councillor Matthews and Councillor Edgington.
Well, I think Claire's actually hit the nail on the head. There's, both practices in Louth are, people are really struggling to get through on the phone, let alone have a phone consultation. And then the lines are going dead. And then eventually later in the day, if they can get through, they're told, well, there aren't any appointments today, phone at 8 tomorrow morning. It really is. It's a shambles, quite honestly. And it's something that councillors ought to be really, really worried about. I was going to say as well, if we're going back to one CCG, I used to be the council's representative going to Lincoln when there was a Lincolnshire CCG, and I used to write a monthly write-up of what happened, and I used to localise it. And I thought that way worked much better. We knew what was going on. Since the CCG, we've had the East Lincolnshire one. I don't think we've had a clue what's going on most of the time, and that's tragic for our residents. But I'm completely behind Claire on this, and I think the GP practices ought to be telling us what's going on. If they're not going to do face-to-face consultations anymore, heaven help us. It's really frightening for people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, Joe, if I could just say, because we're being told in the media and by everyone that we should be encouraging people to go back to normality. But if you're being, you've got that block of even getting a face-to-face appointment before you even get a referral anywhere, people are not doing it now. People are, self-administering and so on and so forth. And it's a very slippery track to be heading down.
Yeah, and this all goes back to what we were saying earlier in this meeting, that we need to know what the plans are to coming out of COVID, really, by everybody, all health providers. Councillor Matthews, you're next.
I'm just really going back to what Claire says. I think we have to keep things in proportion. We are opening up. We have a huge majority of day visitors who go straight back to where they live to get any services. And that actually a lot of our issues with health on the coast are because we have an aged resident population, a huge amount of aged population of Asian people who have quite a lot of serious issues. But also coming up about the face-to-face, I do think we need to be proactive as a council, right from now, saying okay, a hybrid's fine, but you cannot possibly safely diagnose everything over a phone or a face or a Skype or anything. And, we run the risk of sort of, causing more problems by that. And it shouldn't be used as an excuse not to give a proper, good, decent service.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Edgington.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Like colleagues, I was horrified, to hear Councillor Newman's contribution. I know that there's like in Skegness, for instance, you've a devil of a job to get a face-to-face appointment with your, with your practice, and I think it's inexcusable. I mean, the last 12 months, I've had 2 dental appointments. They took proper precautions, not an issue. Now, if dentists can see patients on that sort of face-to-face, literally basis, what's the excuse for GPs? I sometimes think that their contract of employment needs looking after.
Yeah, it does.
I really do, because I think that they are, it's almost an act of, I can't say fraudulent, but it's not the service that I remember years ago when the general practitioner was just that. I mean, compared to GPs of yesteryear, well, there isn't any comparison. No flattering comparison anyway. That's my view. And I do, you get angry with these people. And I think, they need sorting out, quite frankly. Enough is enough. We tolerate too much in terms of bad service. And it's about time, that the powers that be took it on board, because we're getting an awful service. They really are. And it's just not good enough.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've got that off my chest. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got nobody else indicating they would want to speak. Michelle and Sandra, I think we've given you quite a lot to go away and organise and sort. And I think you've picked up the passion that everybody feels about this particular topic at the moment, and that there are a lot of issues around that we feel need looking at and addressing. Councillor Makinson-Saunders, did you want the last word?
Yes, please. I was going to suggest that perhaps somebody ought to have a word with Victoria Atkins as our MP, so that this message gets back to Westminster, because we can't solve it on our own. We can only solve it with the help of MPs who look at the rural situation. And I think even if it's just a chat between Craig and Victoria Atkins, because I'm sure they're on extremely good terms, I think it's really important that's done as soon as possible, because our concerns, the stuff that Claire's bringing up and other people are bringing up, is just absolutely vital for our communities. And we've got to hammer it home, and it's got to go to Westminster, because the cities have a very loud voice. We don't, and we've got to shout louder and louder.
Well, I'm sure we can. The leader is always very receptive to anything that comes from Overview, and I'm sure if we raise that with him, he will be happy to take that on board and speak to Victoria Atkins about it.
Thank you. That'd be really good.
Councillor Harrison, did you want the final word?
Yes, please, Chairman. To reiterate what Jill is saying, yes, I do think somewhere or other we must get through to our MP. But earlier, Simon talked about, when he talked about the local plan, about Section 106 agreements, which of course the Health Authority can become involved in. We've built all these extra houses, which is going to put extra strain that we already have. Have we any idea, can we get the information about what the health service have used as a result, what we've benefited from Section 106? Because I've never heard of anything that's been done to improve hospitals or extend our services.
I think the issue or the problem often with 106 monies is that it's often used for capital projects rather than ongoing staffing issues, because there's a resource issue past the 106 money for taking on extra staff, and it's often the staff that are needed rather than extra buildings, but I mean, we'll leave that with Michelle. Councillor Matthews, briefly.
Just to say that they have got a lot better recently in asking for more money for the NHS to extend facilities and improve. It used to be that they didn't even bother, but it is happening more and more.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, I think we've had a good discussion and we've got some good actions and ways forward on what is a very important topic, not just to us as a council, but to our communities as a whole at the moment.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back? Is Sandra going to go back to health scrutiny to give our concerns with a very strong voice about having a decent service that isn't just all over Skype? Is that going to be something that we're going to send her back with?
Well, I think
as well as Victoria Atkin and everything, but
yes,
we need to follow a trail.
Yeah, and I think that's what we were leaving Michelle and Sandra to talk about, exactly what that trail would look like to actually get the best coverage for everybody. Sandra and then Michelle. Sandra, mute.
Chairman, yeah. I agree, but I think it'd be better if it was a formal letter from the overview committee, just myself. And perhaps Michelle and I could gather up the relevant things that we could then write and request that they are on the agenda and we get a chance to ask questions at scrutiny level.
Yeah, thank you. Michelle?
Thank you. Yeah, my suggestion was going to be similar, actually, in terms of having an evidence-based letter approach to health scrutiny in Lincolnshire. And I'm quite happy to meet with Councillor Harrison outside of this meeting to develop some proposals. There are some really key themes that have emerged from that discussion today, which I think helps us to then be able to put those to our health colleagues to sort of look at what does that mean for us locally. So, Councillor Harrison, I'll contact you after this meeting if that's okay.
Yeah, and if you think it's appropriate, please do what you feel necessarily as under my name as chairman of overview as well. Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to item 8, which is updates from scrutiny and policy panels. You've got on page 31 the work of the Tackling Housing Standards Scrutiny Panel that's literally just started. It's met twice so far, and I've had some email correspondence with Councillor Smith, who is the chairman of that panel. I don't think there is anybody on that panel actually in the meeting, is there?
I am chairman.
Oh yes, Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, and we've got another meeting tonight.
Excellent. I mean, they're meeting fortnightly at the moment, which is excellent. Councillor Mackinson-Saunders, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm always a bit perturbed when I read that questions are being drafted and will be sent to the witnesses prior to the meeting. I sometimes think we give, I know we're trying to find evidence and stuff, but I always hope that people do know their jobs well enough to be able to answer the questions. And all this, are you going to be able to ask a question that's not on the blooming list? Because I think on the scrutiny, one thing leads to another, and it does worry me at times that they're being drafted. Is that exactly where it's going? I just find that a bit depressing about scrutiny.
I don't think it's exclusive, though. I mean, the list of questions just helps people to prepare particular areas before they come. But I mean, my understanding is that it's not exclusive and that there will always be supplementary and follow-up questions that occur during the course of the meeting.
Well, as long as they're not prescriptive, that's fine. Yeah.
No, I think that's the case. Did you want to say anything, Councillor Mrs. Harrison? If you're on that panel? No. Okay, well, we look forward to hearing how that work is progressing. Just as an update, which Alison would have given if she was here, but I did email Rebecca this morning. At 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, there is a meeting of the panel or the people who volunteered to work with Alison and Rebecca to work up a scope for post-COVID work that Overview wanted to do, looking at the particular issues that we raised last time. As it's going to be probably 6 weeks before we meet again, and we've only got one panel going at the minute, what we were proposing to do is, once the panel's met tomorrow morning, Alison, if she's well enough, will work up a scope and then email it round to members of Overview to have a look at. So we can start work on that. Councillor Meckinson Saunders?
No, I think my hand had stayed up. Sorry,
Okay.
fine.
So obviously it'll depend to some degree how Alison is, but we'll look at making alternative arrangements if she's not well enough to work that up. And I'll talk to Michelle and Rebecca after tomorrow's meeting. Okay, so is there anything anybody wants to ask or comment on item 8? If not, we'll go on to item 9, which is the overview and scrutiny recommendation tracker. We did, when we had the pre-meeting on Friday, have some discussion around this, because I was concerned, starting going through it, that we do have quite a long list of updates on some of the issues. And the first one, commercial waste scrutiny panel one, is a good example, really, that I think there's something like 17 updates, or quite a lot of updates. And I'm conscious of the fact that in the timescale, it initially said March 2020. Well, COVID has changed the timescales on a lot of things. And rather than keep hassling officers and looking at unrealistic timescales, we just ask people to look again at the timescales on some of these pieces of work and come forward with some realistic timescales so that we can monitor in a more timely fashion, really. So that is something that came up on Friday and is in train, I think, isn't it, Elaine, that we're going to ask people to do that. But having said that, I'll do as we normally do and go through a page at a time and see if there's anything you want to raise. So page 1 of the scrutiny tracker, and page 2, page 3, and you know, there again, there is a good example in dark type. It says no further progress at present due to COVID issues, and that's got April 2020 next to it. So to have a realistic view now of what the new timescale would be good. Anything on page 3? Anybody wants?
Fiona, could I comment? All these recommendations are fine, but do they really need do they need to be gone through to see if they're still apt in the post-COVID world? Well, I wonder if there might be, if they might still be really relevant.
And that's really part of the review, I think, as well. It's not just the timescales, it's the relevance and where we're at with some of these things, rather than just keep churning out the same recommendations and the same sheets of paper with no further comment, etc. on. We just need to be realistic about some of these things.
I think that it would. Can I go on the list for tomorrow or something? I can only be at the meeting for part of the time tomorrow because we're opening our baby bank tomorrow. But if that could go on the list for tomorrow for the post-COVID scrutiny things, that we look at these lists. It ought to be something that a group could do, couldn't they?
I'm loath to put it on tomorrow because I think that's a very focused piece of work that's going to result in a scope. But we're conscious of, and we've had a discussion, the vice chairman and Alison and I and Elaine, on Friday, and we are conscious of the issues, and we'll keep a tab on it and
Watchful
look
eye,
at how
right.
we can best manage it. I think.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Anything else on page 3? Page 4, and again, there's some examples of long lists of updates that just need reviewing, really. And I think Councillor Foster from our last meeting and Victoria did say they would come back and talk about the markets reopening and how things were going, etc. And again, that's one that we're conscious of, and we've got under review to come at an appropriate time to talk about. Anything else on page 5? Page 6, and the conservation area scrutiny, the recommendations have gone back in.
Good.
And you'll see at the bottom of page 7 there is mention of the conservation champion.
Yeah, and that one goes over onto page 8, and
Yeah.
it says instead it was agreed to jointly carry out rapid surveys of each area. Who is jointly, please? Because do we know that the person who do we know that's doing this, and what qualifications do they have to do it? Because I think some of us know our conservation areas slightly better than others.
We can ask that question.
Thank you.
I can't.
No, it really concerned me.
I can't answer that.
No.
So we'll find that out.
Thank you.
Anything else on page 8? And page 9?
Yeah, what's the local list campaign? We get these things thrown in. Who's told us about its communication again? The local list campaign.
Yeah.
Where's anybody bothered to update us what these things are? It's so sad because a lot of us are quite interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, funding secured and post holder in place. Well, I've just seen something on Facebook. Lincolnshire County Council are looking for a heritage officer to go around and survey all the pubs in Lincolnshire. So who is 27,000 a year or something? Sounds quite a job that a lot of people might quite like. Who's doing what? I just think the whole thing is just, we don't know who. It's communication, Fiona, isn't it?
Yeah, no, we can find that out.
Thank you. Good.
Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13.
It's a bit depressing. There's no update on anything to do with carbon management, isn't it?
Well, that's one of the things that on Friday Alison said she would chase Sarah up on, because she thought she'd seen some updates, but I think she'd been on leave.
She was planting trees.
But it is one of the things I was raised on Friday, and
all right, then we'll leave it with you.
Alison was going to chase. I'm sure that's right. Edward and Elaine, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, page 15. And page 16.
Something on page 16, Chairman, was this relation. We were going to just get a gauge from the overview committee about the recommendation 1 in terms of the scrutiny panel, and we wondered whether actually this recommendation is absolutely is it reasonable and can it actually work? Because you know, we could have a recommendation that we have impact on all sorts of things in terms of whether economic development and tourism should become a standard feature on a report. You know, for example, would a report on safeguarding really need a standard feature in its report highlighting any impact on tourism? Just seems a bit over the top and unnecessary. It might be that the impact on tourism will be only certain reports, so we can't really have it as a standard feature. I don't think it works.
I agree.
No. And that was the feeling when we discussed it on Friday.
Yeah.
I mean, Councillor Makinson Saunders is agreeing. Is anybody violently objecting to that? Well, objecting, full stop. And
I don't know who we take that to in terms of who sort of sets the die for council reports, but that was obviously a recommendation that needed to go to that particular officer, so that we then set the die for future reports. But actually, we're not sure that it's workable or feasible.
But I think if as an overview committee we agree that that isn't reasonable to take forward, we can remove it.
Yeah.
What do others think?
Yeah.
What does everybody else feel?
Well, I thought it was a bit daft in the first place, and I was on that scrutiny panel over the 2 years it took to do.
What does everybody else feel? If we propose that we remove it, is everybody going to vote in favour?
Yeah.
If we officially propose, or I have proposed in the chair, we remove it, and it's been seconded, I think, by either.
Saw two hands there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah, Helen did.
Yeah.
Jill and I do. So.
All those in
Trevor
favour?
does.
Yeah, no, that's unanimous. Everybody's agreed that that's removed. So there's nobody left to vote against. So we will remove that. Anything else on page 16? Page 17.
Well, can I comment on Vital and Viable? It's just so disappointing. We hear nothing, we see nothing, we're consulted on nothing. We all gave of our time freely. I think I can understand why time is being spent on the town's fund. Rightly so. It's a huge, huge investment in the area. I couldn't agree more. But it's a joke, Vital and Viable. And a budget allocation provided. Budget for what? Who's asked us what? You know, come on. Let's communication yet again, isn't it? But I think Lydia's got all her work cut out for the town's fund and stuff. And I'll declare an interest here. I know it's such a small team and they just don't have the capacity to be doing so much of what we're expecting them to do. And it's a problem.
I have to say that locally, Sam Phillips and Lisa Collins have been communicating with board members and the town council, and there is an updated action plan that they've been working through as far as their capacity allows.
Yeah, well, you're lucky.
As you say, it's a small team and they are very pushed with the amount of work they have to do. But Sam and Lisa have been good locally here in Horncastle, which is obviously all I can speak for.
Yeah, that's good.
Councillor Matthews.
Just to say that, you know, as part of the Vital and Viable work, we were totally excluded here on the coast. This is before the Towns Fund, Jill. All the posters, banners and everything saying love local, shop local. There wasn't a single one on our stretch of coast, which I have complained about. We missed out on the Light Festival. You know, I think we've got to stop segregating.
You could have had
ours. When people come to the area, it should be a whole experience. They'll go Wolds, Coast, Wolds. Certainly my visitors, I send them off into the Wolds and I send them to Louth, to the market and to Horncastle. And we just got to stop this, you know, segregation, little silos. We have to think like the visitor and what the visitor wants to have and just start doing that. But, you know, we should be supporting Love Local and Support Local, particularly in a seasonal economy.
Yeah,
we have to take our money in that short period. And I'm just very disappointed that we didn't get any of the promotional material. And I just think, you know, we just need to maybe look at it and how it would work better for all of us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I agree with you. And I have to say that the bunting that's gone up in Horncastle, courtesy of East Lindsey, has really made the place look bright and cheerful, and people have commented on how nice it looks. So things are being done as far as resources allow. And, you know, officers are working very hard to do what they can. If there's nothing else on that, we'll go on to page, I think we were on 17, weren't we? So we'll go on to page 18. And the bottom of page 18, Alison did say that she would fill in for the next meeting the responses to the implementation of the Boston Borough Council East Lindsey District Council Strategic Alliance, but that is down to her, and obviously she has been off for some time, unwell, and she did come back, and unfortunately he's gone off again, but she will do that for the next meeting. So that takes account of pages 18 and 19.
Can I just comment on that, Fiona, please? Because despite the fact we did, and we concertinaed doing this, and we got it out really fast, I have heard nothing about joint strategy boards, nothing about any of this. And it was really disappointing because we all went into it with great gusto and expectation. And apart from something that some person that doesn't have a name, or perhaps it's Rob Barlow, I don't know, sends out from time to time about the Strategic Alliance, I feel further away from Boston than ever. And I know, and I don't know if now's a good time to make the point. I just really feel that our staff are so stretched at the moment too. I really do have concerns about that, but we haven't got anywhere on this agenda to really say that. But I'd like to pop that in because, you know, we've got all these nice ideas about how we should do things. But I mean, I'm just worried about our staff, really am.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that concern.
Thank you.
But we,
I know it's not relevant to that.
We need to let Alison populate this,
this
piece of work, and then for the next meeting, we need to look at that in depth. If Alison isn't back, I will look. I'll talk to Rob Barlow about how we're going to sort of fill that void in the meantime. Because if she is off for any amount of time, that's going to pile more pressure on her when she comes back, and that's
wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, nobody got anything else on the tracker? We'll go on to the forward plan. And again, Alison did say at the pre-meeting that there is some work going on looking at the forward plan and the descriptions and how things go in there. So there is some work going on to look at how that could be made more relevant and more useful. I think that was, Edward, that was the comment, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think bearing in mind the discussion on the previous one, trackers and the like, you know, if you look at this forward plan here and go back to full council meetings we've had over the past year, how many of the topics discussed in the past year at full council have appeared on, you know, a previous forward plan? So I'm just wondering how relevant this particular document is at this stage. It doesn't sort of seem to encapsulate the ad hoc discussions that we've had at full council. So there's no real way of gauging what is coming up except these are almost routine reports from scrutiny, reports from PSPS, and so and indeed the Strategic Alliance doesn't appear on this whatsoever, as far as I can see. So you know, I think that's the point that Jill has made, and I think it's the point we were making, that you know the relevance of this needs to be refreshed somehow.
Yeah.
And can I ask as well, please, I thought we were meant to have our strategic plans were meant to dovetail in with Boston, and I don't see any evidence of that on our forward plan, but that might be because Alison's poorly.
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, I think these are things we need to keep an eye on and monitor, really.
We have a strategic developer, we have a strategic director, though. Surely he'd have some, this is about strategy going forward. Would he not have any input into this?
Michelle, do you want to come back on that?
So I'm quite happy to have this discussion with SLT in Alison's absence. But I think the other thing just to note in terms of refreshing and refocusing this, the annual delivery plan for the next year has just been agreed by both councils. So I think that provides that framework for making sure that we've got those priorities dovetailing and linking together and making sure they are reflected in here. So hopefully that will help. And so there's been a lot of work over the last few months just to get those things in place. So I think that will be a work in progress. And by the time you see this for your next meeting, it should reflect those decisions that have been made in recent weeks. But I'm quite happy to feed that back to SLT in Alison's absence, if that's helpful.
Yeah, that would be, yeah. Yes, thank you for that, Michelle. Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chairman. I agree that, yeah, we're not really getting enough detail in the forward plan. And it does worry me because last meeting, we legitimately raised some issues about that. If you look back on page 26 and 27 in the report, I think the wording of those responses is just a bit of an insult, actually, particularly the last paragraph on page 27. I think the wording is altogether wrong to come back to it in a response. I don't know what other committee members feel about that.
You've now lost me slightly.
This is Councillor Ashton, isn't it?
Is that, yeah, we should really.
Yeah, it was almost telling us to get back in our box, I felt.
Well, perhaps we should have discussed that really when we looked at that item back then, but if we wish
well,
to,
I thought it better to raise it now because we're now discussing the.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to get back in our box.
It mean, doesn't have to be a big one.
Well,
is it just me?
That's our role as an overview committee, is
Exactly.
to challenge, is to challenge and hold to account partly the portfolio holders. So there's no way we will get back in our box. I mean, if we wish to raise a response to that, we should really have done it back when we were looking at the actions, to be quite honest, because I'm now struggling to find the paper you're referring to. So
well, it's item 4, Chairman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, do people, are you wishing to do something about that, Councillor Harrison, or are you just noting the...
Well, just making the comment, particularly, you know, as one of the overview committee members did raise them as queries with every justification. But it seems how you feel about it, Chairman.
I mean, we will not, as I said, not get back in our box, and we will continue to raise things because that's our role. So basically, we will continue. I think as far as the forward plan is concerned, we need to look and see what the piece of work that's going on at the minute produces, and look next time and see what comes up. On page 53, the performance and governance framework, there will be the quarter's performance will be on our next agenda meeting. It was obviously too quick today to get the March performance figures to this meeting. Is there anything else on page 53? Anybody wants to raise? No. 54. $55 and $56. Okay, but I think it will be, we will need to look quite closely at our next meeting at how that is proposed to be redesigned, etc., and what's on it. Okay, so we're now at item 11 then. I think obviously there is a report for next Tuesday for full council for agreeing a calendar of meetings for next year. But I did look this morning and I couldn't see that the to follow paper had yet to follow for next week. But in the discussion I had as chairman of overview with John Medler, the next overview meeting I was proposing would be the 1st of June, which is 6 weeks today.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I know, incredible to think that 6 weeks today is the 1st of June, but there we go. So provisionally, we will say the 1st of June, but that's subject to confirmation next Tuesday. So having said that, I will say thank you very much for your
Fiona,
attendance.
do you think we could, as an overview group, send Alison our love and say we hope she'll soon feel a lot better? Because we really do worry about her, because she does work hard and it's horrible that she's poorly again. So would that be possible, please?
Yeah, no, we can do that with the greatest pleasure.
Yeah, good point.
Okay. So with that, I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your attendance and